Christopher Rutledge, Executive Director of Macua, joins me live now for more on this story. A very good afternoon to you, Christopher. Thanks very much for your time. I want to start with what Minister Mantashe had to say, that the government is going to recover the monies that were used to rescue those miners in Stilfontein. I don't think anyone can argue against getting the mine owners to pay for whatever damages that come as a result of either their negligence or their inefficiencies or anything that they should have taken responsibility for.
Indeed, we would welcome accountability for all the role players in this massacre and in what turned out to be one of South Africa's biggest human rights crises. While we want to applaud the minister for his comments about claiming that money, 3.5 million back for the rescue service, there is also the question of who then is accountable for the lives of 23 people who died as a result of state action in Stilfontein. This seems to have been an issue that the minister and the portfolio committee, sadly, just seem to try and skirt out of the, I was participating, watching the portfolio committee. Out of the 88 questions that the 17 members of parliament asked the Minister of Police and the Minister of Minerals, only 4 of those questions related to the question of human rights abuses. Now, that is a scary, scary statistic. And I think as South Africa, we are in a deep constitutional crisis when the legislature and the executive blatantly stand as protectors of those who have committed violent or human rights violations. So I think we have a bigger problem than the 3.5 million rand that the minister was speaking about.
Well, is it not because, the Minister of Mineral Resources is on record as having said repeatedly that as far as is concerned, we're dealing with a crime here, full stop?
You see, the minister is not a judge, nor have any of those people been through a court of law so that they can be sentenced to death. So while we are absolutely in favor of law and order, we are absolutely at the same time opposed to arbitrary law enforcement. So there is a reason why we have a court. There is a reason why we have a judicial process. There's a reason why we have a constitution. So the minister and the minister and the state cannot just wake up one morning and decide we're going to go and kill everybody because they happen to be in a certain location. Apartheid did that. We don't expect that from our ministers in a democratic state. So I think while the minister is gleeful in his rejection or in his announcements that he has no sympathy for what he calls illegal miners, I think at the same time, the minister sets a bad example for the state, a constitutional state, which should be the custodian of our constitution and who should be protecting people who fall under the jurisdiction of South Africa to ensure that their rights are protected and that we do not descend into an unconstitutional state, a state which United States of America is slowly becoming, one where the state wakes up one morning and just expels somebody without due process, where the state wakes up and arrests somebody without due process, or in our case, kills people without due process. So I think the minister should look at the mirror and see the Trump in himself and understand that he has become a bit of a fascist in the way that he's approached the problems and the difficulties that poor people face in South Africa.
Now, the police minister, Senzo Mchunu, still says that investigations are underway to find out where the illegally mined minerals end up. And I remember him saying this again, repeatedly, previously, whether he was attending, or speaking at those public meetings in Stilfontein, or it was during interviews and other fora that he has had to address. One would have thought, like on a day like today, especially speaking as they were in front of the country's legislators, they would at the very least put on the table some progress report that says from the time months ago when we started looking at this up until now, this and that and the other thing is what we've been able to confirm, or discover, but this is still work in progress, but nothing of the sort.
And that is a deeply worrying thing, Vuyo, because I find it very difficult for us to accept as a society that our police could have decided that they're going to kill 93 miners in Stilfontein without having done their homework. So they didn't understand what was going on in Stilfontein. They didn't do crime intelligence to say, okay, who are the kingpins? Where's the gold going to? Who's benefiting? How is this process running? Instead of doing all of those things first and then going in a way that can resolve the issue quickly in terms of law enforcement, they simply went there blindfolded, closed all the holes, killed people, and now they're still struggling to find out what exactly is going on. I think that is I think that is something that we as South Africans should not accept from our ministers. We cannot allow a situation where people are wantonly killed, and the minister is simply, well, I don't know. Even though some of the members of parliament did point out to them that there has been research. The Benchmarks Foundation research was raised as an example in which the Benchmarks Foundation claims that corporate miners were actually employing artisanal miners illegally to mine. So the minister, both the Minister of Minerals and the Minister of Police were strangely Andiahas, we don't know what's going on. Now, that's a strange thing. When you're coming before your parliament to account for the deaths of 93 people, and you saying, well, we don't know, that's not acceptable. You cannot be acceptable in a constitutional state.
Now, among the things that your organization, together with several others like your Suncore and your Benchmarks Foundations, has been to allow for artisanal mining, for example, but to also change the rules of the game, especially considering where we are as a country in terms of unemployment.
Yeah, again, a worrying thing emerged, a divergence of views emerged in the Portfolio Committee today again. So on the one hand, we find that the chairperson and many of the members of the committee, as well as the DMPR and the minister, have all been saying that they want to amend the MPRDA, the Minerals, Petroleum Resources Development Act, which is the law that governs the sector. They want to amend the act to criminalize illegal mining. Yet at the same time, many of them have acknowledged that we're dealing here with a situation where in Stilfontein, for example, Buffelsfontein mine left something like 225 billion rands worth of mineral ore deposits below ground. Hence, people started mining there because it's a huge amount of money to just kind of close down in a hole. So people were acknowledging the fact that there are many, many communities who suffer, who should be benefiting from the minerals below our earth. But at the same time, the minister is saying, no, we want to criminalize everybody and want to keep this for corporate miners. Now, that in terms of the world has acknowledged that that is no longer the case. The minister's living in 1960. The 2025 world that we live in, the African Union and the United Nations and many other forums, international forums, have said that artisanal mining has become a part of our society, and we should find ways to include that within the realm of our legislation. But our minister, being the dinosaur in terms of an approach to mining, has just ignored the wisdom and the facts about artisanal mining. Most gold produced today in the world comes from artisanal mining. Corporate miners no longer are the major actors. So for the minister and the department and some of the portfolio committee members to so blindly just have a law and order approach when this is clearly a socio-economic problem leaves a lot to be desired and must worry South Africans, because our leaders and our representatives are blindly following the status quo. They are protecting corporate miners like Patrice Motsepe, whose mine has been implicated in illegal mining, yet nobody says a word, not the media, not the minister, not the portfolio committee, nobody. He's just allowed to mine illegally. He's one of the people that was buying mines from his mine in the Northern Cape was arrested with 700 million rands worth of illegally mined gemstones. Now the minister's talking about 3.5 million. Why did we get the 700 billions of rands that Patrice Motsepe has been stealing from our country?
Christopher Rutledge, let's leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your time. He's the Executive Director of Macua, on the back, of course, of that meeting in Parliament where the Ministers of Police and Mineral Resources spoke to the legislators about what happened in Stilfontein and what can be done to actually avoid something like that ever happening again in our country. Certainly from what Christopher Rutledge is saying, there doesn't seem to have been a clear direction as to where we are going next, with the Minister of Police saying they're still investigating how it is or where these minerals that would have been mined in Stilfontein go and how they get where they get to and who gets to benefit. The minister also updating the committee on plans to ensure that one of the kingpins who was found there but later escaped is brought to account for his actions, but is still at large.